Is Horner on the way out? Is Max about to leave? Should George go to Aston Martin? And is Sauber no longer washed? We answer all of these questions from you, the fans, and more. Importantly, whether Colapinto is the next Verstappen here on your biggest F1 questions now. Hello everybody and welcome to your biggest F1 questions. I'm Jason Hassett, this is Current and Combustion, and I'm only going to ask this once for the whole episode. Please do subscribe as it helps immensely to ensure this gets a bigger reach and frankly puts cash in my pocket. So with that being said, let's jump straight into your biggest questions. Don't forget to leave yours in the comments below. Oh crap, I dropped two. Oh crap. Oh, this has gone marvelously wrong. As you can see, production quality here. I'll just use this one. Hold on. No, I won't. Going well so far. It is 35 degrees here and I'm dying under these lights. Thomas says, if Horner goes, will Verstappen stay? This is an interesting one, isn't it? Because there's rumors once again that Horner goes, and I'm pretty sure we have a question about it that I'll get into more in depth later on. But let's just focus on what Thomas said exactly. If Horner goes, does Verstappen stay? I think the honest answer is not for long, mainly because of the things that I'll probably discuss more in the other question. But mainly because things will start to fall apart. I mean, if Horner goes, it will temporarily give Helmut more of a chance to have a bit more hands-on because he's been backed by the board heavily in Austria. It will give Jos less time to shout, and it might give Max a little bit of reprieve. But the simple fact is that if Horner goes, then realistically a lot of Milton Keynes are going to go as well, because remember, as I'll probably answer in another question, I'm sure there's another Horner question in there, a lot of Milton Keynes will follow Horner wherever he goes. At the end of the day, if Horner leaves Red Bull, it's very, very unlikely that he leaves F1. He is going to be snapped up by a variety of other teams. In fact, we know that Ferrari is already sniffing around. We know that Flavio will welcome him with open arms to Alpine, for example. Jonathan Wheatley could get the boot from Audi, because at the end of the day, as good as Jonathan Wheatley is, Horner is definitely an upgrade for a massively advantageous company like that. Even Cadillac could look at him, and that's to note none of the bigger teams as well around. Like obviously Mercedes aren't going to go for him because Toto owns part of the team, but there's a lot of other teams that would give him a partnership there. I think the only teams that realistically are completely off their table would be obviously Red Bull, Ferrari's on the table, obviously Red Bull, Mercedes, and Aston Martin, I think, just because I don't think Newey would be happy with him coming over. But yeah, as for Max leaving, essentially, I think he would, just because there's going to be massive brain drain from that team. Horner's been pushing for, the engine, all of those things. And just the biggest thing is, we know that from the past in F1 teams can't be run by committee. So if you're a Verstappen fan asking for Horner to leave, it's kind of pointless anyway, because if Horner goes, the company and the team itself is going to be in disarray for at least a decade. History's shown us that repeatedly. Ron Dennis left. It took a long time to come back. Jean Todt, who was kind of the force behind Ferrari for a long time, left, and it hasn't won a championship since. Williams, when Frank Williams kind of, I know that happened before he left, but, basically history has just shown us time and time again. And the other thing that history has shown us is that an F1 team can't be run by committee, no matter how much money and backing it has. It just doesn't work unless you have that strong leadership. And yeah, Horner is loved by Milton Keynes, so yeah, I think Max goes in pretty short order. I'd be surprised, to be honest, if Max stays anytime after Horner goes, because he'll see the writing on the wall. I'd say he'd be looking for a contract as quickly as possible. Although I would not be surprised that if they do force Horner out, if it's a case of Helmut and Jos basically say, look, Max, we'll make this your team. We'll completely build it around you, although it already is. And try and keep him there for a year or two. But I would say he'd be gone pretty quickly after that. Thank you, Thomas, for the question. Hey there, just a quick interruption to say that if you enjoy these Your Biggest F1 Questions episodes, but you sometimes don't want to watch an entire 45-minute episode. You just want to see some of your favorite questions throughout the week. Then we've got you covered. You see, we've just launched Current and Combustion Clips, which is in the link in the description below. You can go subscribe to, and you will just see the biggest questions from the week as opposed to a one big episode with all of the questions. Now, some of you may be wondering why I split that into 2 channels and why I didn't just drop those clips, those questions like I did before on this channel. Well, the reason for that is YouTube gets a little bit confused. Story time is for a like automotive, and it knows like that someone content, and it can figure out a 5 or 10 minute video aren't interested in 15. That's a long-winded interruption just to say that if you just want to watch individual questions that you're interested in, you can get all of that served to you directly on a plate on Current and Combustion Clips. The link's in the description below. Now back to the video. Let's see. Fred asks, I imagine not Versor. Oh, here we go. It seems like Horner is under pressure. Do you think he'll go? So, yeah, so now we can dive into, I guess, the bigger question at hand here, which is Horner on the way out, and do you think he'll, is he on the way out? Simply put. So, I think it very much looks like it. It seems like the Chowdhury family, I can't remember their actual name, Chowdhury, the Thai side, the majority shareholders who saved him last time are no longer on his side. It does seem like, not that they're not on his side, but basically now that they're not dominating the sport, they're not really that pushed if there's a shakeup. You have to understand, at the end of the day, realistically, it was Dietrich that was running the company, the Austrian side, and now his son Mazashitz was the one alongside the Austrian board and Helmut and Jos that kind of wanted to force Horner out last year. At the end of the day, his saving grace was that the Thai side came in and backed him up, mainly because the company was winning and generating a shit ton of profits, frankly, for Red Bull, and therefore they just didn't want anything to be shaken up. Now that the company isn't winning, now that the team isn't just winning outright, there's the problem with the second driver, and it seems like Max basically won't stay if the company doesn't win in 2026. There's less interest in the Thai side to stay on, and it seems like the Thai side essentially will just kind of now do whatever the Austrian side wants to do, which I guess is a tactic of, well, look, you do what you want now, you can force Horner out, but if it goes wrong, it's on you. Like, you're paying for this mess, not us, I would imagine is the kind of behind the scenes conversation. The latest we've heard is that in Milton Keynes now, basically a lot of the decision making, or the heavy decision making, I would assume around driver decisions and maybe some of the big investment and sponsorship decisions, is being taken away from Christian Horner. And it sounds like in short order as well, that they're trying to take away most of his power to make decisions by himself. Now, if that continues on, then absolutely Horner will go, because at the end of the day, why would he stay under those conditions? It's been his team essentially since they started winning in 2010 onwards. He has been basically allowed free run of the place, and the entirety of the Milton Keynes staff are around him, which is why I think, yes, if these rumors are to be believed, that he will go somewhere else. Now, the Ferrari talks, as I discussed last week, will fall pretty flat because the Ferrari company doesn't seem to want to give over mainstay control to anyone like they did when John Todd was there, who kind of gained it by proving himself. But yeah, Horner's not going to want to go to somewhere where he has to kowtow to a board, because at the end of the day, the reason he would leave Red Bull is because he's going to have to kowtow to a board. So if he leaves Red Bull, that is the reason, and he's not going to want to go somewhere else that does that. And realistically, with his track record as well, he's going to want to go down the line of where Toto Wolff is at the moment in terms of team ownership. I think the Red Bull company needs to be pretty careful about what they're doing right now, because at the end of the day, I know, and anyone who has any sort of connection or insight in Red Bull's factory at Milton Keynes knows and will tell you, he is a god in Milton Keynes. Like, everybody in the Milton Keynes factory loves him. And I think that's one of the main reasons why the board and Helmut and Jos are kind of eager to get him out, is because at the end of the day, he has so much sway and pull that whatever they want to do kind of goes back against them anyway. So yeah, I think he's going to be a problem for them, because if he goes, like I said in the last question, he's going to take a lot of people with him. So, yeah, I think he's on the way out, but I think that at the moment it's a tactic of trying to force him out instead of firing him. I would imagine that given the amount he's done for the company over the past few years, and given it's not that long since Dietrich left, and what Dietrich wanted was to keep the company running essentially the way it was. He wanted Helmut and Newey and Horner to keep kind of running this baby for him. I would imagine there's quite a big performance clause in there, and it'll cost them a massive sum of money to go. There's probably also the case as well that Horner has probably linked a lot of the staff to himself, in that if he's fired, that they can go with him. I would imagine, like, if he's smart after 2022, he probably did that with a lot of contracts and made it so that, a lot of the engineers would be allowed to leave freely if he went. So I would say there's probably a bit of game playing going on now in order to kind of squeeze him to the point where he leaves himself. But in Formula One, it's a money game. And at the end of the day, I would not be surprised if Flavio at Alpine, Audi, maybe Cadillac, a few of these companies are in talks with him, as well as Ferrari, obviously, to kind of see what that would cost them, you know? And the reason I keep thinking it's going to be Alpine is because of the location. I mean, Enstone is not far away from where Horner already lives. That's not that important because he could obviously move quite easily, but he does have a young family. And more importantly, if a lot of the Milton Keynes staff want to go with him, then, Milton Keynes to Enstone isn't a huge deal. Again, Aston would make sense as well, but given Newey and so on, I don't see that happening. So I would say Enstone for me still makes the most sense in terms of where he's trying to be wrangled, and also the Flavio's there. But to answer the bottom line question, do I think he'll go, Fred? Yeah, I think this could be another silly season shakeup. I think he's going to want to cling on until 2026 to kind of live out his dream of getting, a full works team with his engines and so on. I think he's going to want to hold on to that for as long as possible. But I think he will go. I just think it'll be 2026 before it happens. I hope that answers that. Erica says, should George Russell go to Aston? I would say that there are two sides to this, really, isn't there? Because to answer the question simply, should George Russell go to Aston? If he has any chance of staying at Mercedes, I think he should do that. I have massive faith in Newey to turn the team around, but I think it's going to be 2027. I don't think it's going to be 2026. I think there's going to be some teething issues and so on. Very similar to like 2009 for Red Bull, for example, where they were close to winning. But there was a lot more lead time to that in 2009, for example. So I think there's going to be some teething issues with that company, with the facilities, with all of these different things that Newey is going to have to deal with hand in hand with Andy Cowell. And I do believe that they'll get there. I just think it'll be 2027. And I think it's more likely now that Mercedes will be able to get on top of the 2026 regulations in terms of the engine. I do think other teams will do a better job in terms of the aerodynamic. And actually, I think that given that the engine should be, on par with each other now, there should be parity on the engines among the manufacturer and supplier because of how that's gone. I think that will be a problem for them in terms of McLaren. But if it's just talking Aston versus Mercedes, I would say he should stay at Mercedes because it's more likely they hit the ground running in 2026. I also think that their engineering team has learned a lot in the past 3 seasons. And frankly, up until this season and the end of last season, I was pretty doom and gloom about Mercedes coming back in 2026. The reason that has changed for me is more so with the competition. I think I was expecting Red Bull, who would have a lot better of an engineering team in terms of aerodynamics, to be able to beat them. I think, as we've just discussed with Horner, that may not be the case now because of the ongoing politics I think that Honda will have to, they've had to tool up quite quickly. And I think Aston's tooling up quite quickly to where I think for at least 2026, Mercedes will have the advantage. I think McLaren, if there is that engine parity, which there should be, should beat them. But I think in terms of Russell's best bet for where he could potentially win a championship, where his best bet would be to stay at Mercedes. So I think he should stay. Now, the question is going to be what happens if Max Verstappen decides to go to Mercedes and Russell is forced out? If it is the case of Russell is forced out of Mercedes by a Max Verstappen move, then yes, I think he should go to Aston. I think it's the most logical choice. I think that it would either for me be Aston or McLaren. I think Ferrari is in just a woeful place at the moment. I don't expect them to be good in 2026. I think Audi will take too long to come up. I think Cadillac is going to take a lifetime. I think Alpine, just needs to prove themselves of being capable of doing anything before he should go there. So I think Aston Martin makes the most sense unless he can get a seat in McLaren, which I don't think he will unless those two drivers massively fall out this season and one of them decides to leave. So yeah, I think in terms of where to go, I think Aston makes the most sense. To answer the question bluntly though, should George Russell go to Aston? I think realistically, no, unless he's forced to, basically. I guess that's the only way I could put it, because if he gets a chance to stay at Mercedes, which I think he will, then I think he should stay there. I think realistically, it's going to come down, isn't it, to whatever Max Verstappen does at the end of the day. Because if Max decides to pick up sticks and go to Mercedes, then George probably won't have a chance. Although realistically, it should be George and Max, but that's just not going to happen for a variety of reasons. Is it one? I don't think Jos and Max are going to want George to be there at the end of the day. Max and George don't exactly get along on a lot of things, so them being teammates would be a nightmare. I think George would stay at the end of the day. I think he backs himself. But I think that if it comes to that situation, George is going to be the one going out because of Jos Verstappen's demands more than anything else, and because Toto has pretty much put his foot down on keeping Antonelli and building Antonelli as the next Verstappen. That in itself builds out a whole new thing. If you were just going on pure performance, it should be George and Max, but that's unfortunately not always how Formula One works unless you are a world champion. Just to add another piece onto this, do I think it's likely though? No. I think that one of two things will happen this year. At the end of the day, if Max is to go anywhere, it probably would, the likelihood of Max leaving, I think, is less and less, because the option for him really is Mercedes, and where Mercedes is right now is way off where even Red Bull is right now in terms of performance. I know a lot of Max fans are going to be like, but it's just Max performing over that car. It's like, no, he can only drive the car on a limit. So unfortunately, that's not the case. And at the end of the day, George will be driving that Mercedes basically on the limit of what it can do. And if you don't agree with that, that's fine. But that is frankly what I believe. I think George has proven over the years of his career that he can drive a car on the limit, even a difficult one. So I think he'll be there. So I think, it's a big gamble to just, as much as I think Mercedes will be better next year, it's a big gamble to leave before seeing that and locking yourself in, because as much as Toto's going to want Max, does he sign Max on a 1-year contract? I don't know. Like, losing George for 1 year, it seems like a bit of a gamble as well. And I think Toto's more pragmatic than that. And Toto's been around long enough to know that if you have a great car, then, George would win the championship in it anyway. So yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, because I think personally what's going to happen is I think they're going to try and force Horner out. And I think they only do that if Jos and Max basically agree to stay. So I don't see it happening, but yeah, again, to answer the question frankly, should George go to Aston? Only if he gets forced out of Mercedes. That's the way I would put it. This is just a quick interruption, not to ask you to be a Colapinto or Flavio fan, but to ask you to check out our new series, Storytime, where we delve in to, well, I say we, it's me basically, isn't it? But where I dive in to, it's me. These people are useless. I've gone so Hollywood. Where I delve in to some of the biggest stories in automotive history. Obviously, it's not for just F1 fans. It is for the petrol heads among you. And it's going to be out every Wednesday going forward. And we've already covered Mercedes, Citroen's coming up, Ford is coming up, Honda's coming up, Porsche's coming up. And then we're going to dive into stories more deep, more niche, like the GM EV1, like the Porsche 911. And I would love if some of you go check that out to give me feedback as it grows. So watch Storytime. I'll put a link in the description below. And now back to your biggest F1 questions. Matt says, oh, this hurts. When should Colapinto be booted? Well, I think, look, the obvious answer to this is never. Colapinto should be kept forever because he's the best driver on the grid. He's better than Verstappen. Frankly, I don't care what anyone says. Thanks, Flav. Look, as you all know, I'm a Colapinto fan. But I will admit, let me just be frank here, Franco. He has been underwhelming in the first few races, but I think that's kind of to be expected. Look, I mean, I know I'm a Colapinto fan, so obviously I'm going to say these things, but Doohan was underwhelming and crashed quite a bit during his first 5 races. And Colapinto is trying to do 3 things that Flavio has lined out for him. Not crash, be fast, and score points. And unfortunately, he tried to be fast and then crashed in Imola in Q1. And I think that the obvious thing is that he's basically just trying now to get on top of the car and not crash. And I think he did that in the first 2 races. The first race, we can't expect him just to blitz it, especially given where that car is. Like, this is the thing that I think isn't being underlined here, is you've got to look at the other car and where the other car is. And at the end of the day, the other car wasn't in the points and wasn't very quick in Imola. The other car wasn't in the points and wasn't very quick in Monaco. And the other car was quicker in Spain. But at the end of the day, the only reason Colapinto wasn't up there with Gasly is because of the mechanical fault. Now, it has been said that there is potentially some merit to the idea that Colapinto caused that mechanical fault by not dropping the clutch right. But at the end of the day as well, like, I mean, he's a rookie who's been thrown into a new team with no testing, no nothing. Doohan had all the testing. I think, like, you know, you can talk about the first 3 races. Doohan didn't do much better than this, and Doohan had testing to go under his belt and a race in Abu Dhabi as well, and was the reserve driver for the team, and was built into the team. So the fact that Colapinto's not doing much worse, actually he's not doing worse realistically than Doohan, given all the advantages Doohan had in consideration over Colapinto, is kind of ridiculous. So I think he should be given more time. Frankly, I think he should be given the whole season. And I would have said that about Doohan as well. I don't think Doohan should have been booted either, if I'm honest. Do I think Doohan deserved to keep the seat for 2026? No. But did he deserve to at least have half a season or a full season? Yes. Look, I think, especially when it comes to the tires in Formula One, there is so much learning that you need to do compared to F2, F3. And I think that we know that Franco has the underlying potential. So I'll put it this way. I think if Gasly was regularly scoring points for the last 3 races, not just 1 out of 3, then sure, Colapinto would be under more pressure. But in the 3rd race at Spain, in his first real race, as Flavio put it, he was on pace with Gasly right up until that mechanical fault. I just think he should be given the rest of the season regardless. I think there's just no point doing this swap in and out. Like, Red Bull have proven this. It just doesn't work. You know, you can't just swap drivers in. They need time to get used to the car, embed themselves and so on. So I think he should be given more time. I think he should be given the rest of the season, frankly. I think the underlying pace we know is there. And I think what's happened here is an obvious situation where he crashed in Q1 when he tried to put the boot down and just wasn't on top of the car, wasn't prepared. He'd been out of the car for a while, all of these things. And I think what's happened now is he's doing something similar to what Antonelli is doing, which is trying to build up instead of starting high and crashing over and over again. He's trying to build himself back up. And the other thing that I have to bring up is that I think there's been this image of Colapinto as a crasher, which if he didn't have that at Williams, I think we wouldn't be concerned about it right now. Because in Williams, he had a couple of crashes. The only egregious one I would say that is similar to Imola is Las Vegas. The other ones were ridiculous situations, frankly. Like in Brazil, he had called that he needed to come off those tires and the team tried to hang him out and it didn't work and he crashed. And at the end of the day, Albon crashed a lot in that Williams as well. So I think there's just a mountain of pressure on him and he's quite good at absorbing that pressure. But I think to add 5 races in is ridiculous. And Flavio, I don't know who said 5 races, but it's not the case. It's like you said it, Flavio, repeatedly. But yeah, I think he should be given the rest of the season, to be honest with you. I think Doohan should have as well, but now that Franco's in, I think Franco should get it. And honestly, I think Franco should have got it anyway from the start. I think if you're talking in terms of just underlying pace and aggressiveness and wheel-to-wheel ability, Franco is just a better racing driver. And I know I'm biased in saying that, but he is. He's just a better racing driver. He's not crash happy. He never was in the junior series. He was always a capable pair of hands. And he proved in Williams that, if they can nurture him and give him that time to build up and take some of the pressure off, when he wasn't under pressure, he was absolutely killing it. That Singapore start was incredible. So I think he should be, frankly, given till the end of the season. I can't say it enough. I think that's the case. Let's see what we have next. I think this is the last of the longer questions before we jump on to the other ones. Trisha says, is it time for Hamilton to retire? Oh, God. I'm in two minds about this, if I'm honest, because half of me says yes and half of me says no. Where do I begin? Which side do we start on? Well, okay. Here's what I'll say. I think no, and here's why. So here's devil's. I'll do it this way. I'll fight myself on this because I am very 50-50 on this. Half of me, and here's the side of me. We'll start with the optimistic side. I think qualifying against Leclerc was always going to be tough. And as I said last year, if he couldn't outqualify, in the head-to-heads last year and, throughout their time together, in terms of qualifying, George absolutely destroyed Hamilton in qualifying. Like, it was an annihilation. And if you're going to argue with me on that, look up the heads-to-heads first, because I think it was like 16 or 17-6 or something ridiculous like that. 18-6, sorry. Which is like Lance Stroll, Alonso territory. On top of that, let's be honest here as well, like a third of the time in qualifying, he was beaten by Bottas. Now, Bottas is a good qualifier, but the point I'm making here is that Lewis has always been far better in the races than he has been in qualifying throughout his career, I think, anyway. I don't know what you're going to say, but he has 100 pole positions. Yeah, well, that's easy when you have the fastest car 100 times out of 150. So, you only have to beat your teammate. And for most of his career, he's had shit teammates. Yeah, I said it, right? Because Bottas was for most of his career, was for a chunk of his career. He had Kovalainen for a couple of years, right? He had Button, who was a midfield champion. I'm saying it. I don't care. And he had Rosberg, who was frankly terrible and he should have never lost to. So, you want to argue with me on those things, I'm sure some of you are triggered. But yeah, anyway, look, I'm partially winding up there. Partially it's true. But anyway, my point is, He's not one of the best qualifiers on the grid in my opinion. He's just not. So the point of this is to say that his race pace, his strategy, his kind of, way of running up a championship has always been amazing. And for him to lose in qualifying to Leclerc, frankly, isn't a surprise. As I said repeatedly last year, if he's not beating George Russell in qualifying at his own team, he's not going to beat Leclerc at his team. So that was to be expected. And to be honest, in fact, in qualifying, he hasn't been as far off of Leclerc as I expected him to be. So that's the optimistic side. It's not as bad as I expected it to be. The problem is that where he's been really strong has been the races. And right there, Leclerc has been beating him more often than not. So it's 8-1 or 8-2 in qualifying, I think, so far this year. But I think it's a bit more balanced in the races, isn't it? I think it's only 7-2 or something. So, right. The reason I say this is I think that if we're just going in terms of pure pace and pure ability against Leclerc should always be winning, right? Leclerc's been there for years. Hamilton is adapting. Hamilton's older. It's going to take him longer to adapt. He's adapting to a new engine. He's adapting to a new team. He's adapting to a team that, frankly, kills the spirit of anyone who joins. That said, I think a lot of people, especially Hamilton fans, owe Vettel an apology, but, that's a story for another time. So I think he should stick it out. And I think that at the end of the day, given the fact that we're getting all new, brand new cars that Leclerc hasn't been, adapting to for the last few years in Ferrari in 2026, I think he should stay for the 2026 season. And I would say the bottom line on it is that if I had to call it, I would say with the amount of money spent and with the fact that we've got a reset next year anyway, it would be in his best interest and Ferrari's best interest to keep him for 2026 and for him to stay for 2026 and see how that goes. I mean, if they could go back in time, it would be in their best interest to keep Sainz because Sainz, like Hamilton hasn't been an upgrade on Sainz so far. May change, but so far he just hasn't been. I'm sorry. So that's the optimistic side, which wasn't that optimistic, if I'm honest, was it? But here we are. Now for the pessimistic side. Yeah, I know. Part of me thinks he should retire because the simple fact is, if this was just this season in isolation, then everything I just said would make me just 100% say, no, give it till 2026. Let him get the season. Let him embed himself. He's still there. He's still racing well. All of those things. The problem is that all of the things that are making him slow and making it difficult to adapt and all of the things he's saying and trying and doing are the exact same issues that we saw for the last 3 seasons in Mercedes. That is the pessimistic side for me that makes me think that it doesn't matter if we go to 2026 with a new regulation set. It's just he's not going to be able to adapt. I mean, there is the flip side, as I've just said, which is 2026 is completely new regulations, so maybe they won't reappear. But the fact that he's having the same issues at a new team and so on tells me that his adaptability is just gone. He's just not able to adapt anymore. And I think that at his age and given the fact that he, I think, got used to having the team kind of work around him constantly from 2014 to 2020, essentially. I know Rosberg was there, but, that very quickly fell apart. It went, a lot of the team shifted to Hamilton. I think that given that and the fact that 2021 was his first time in the simulator in years, when he finally had to work again, I just think that drive to adapt is gone, and he keeps trying to do what he did in Mercedes, which is pull the team to set up the car for him, even if that's slower. And he's unwilling or unable to just, get the fastest setup and adapt himself to it, which is what Leclerc does. Leclerc shows up on Friday, tells the team to make basically whatever they think will be the fastest setup, and then from Friday to Saturday, he adapts. He's been doing that now for a while. I think he realizes that Ferrari doesn't know how to tweak setups. And, if Mercedes couldn't tweak the setup for Hamilton, then he's got no chance in Ferrari. So, yeah, I think he should stay until 2026. Frankly, I think they've paid too much for, him to go in 2026. And, at the end of the day, why would he go when he could potentially get lucky that the car just suits him in 2026 and make another 100 million? They'd have to cancel the contract. He's got the ambassadorship. There's all these different things. So I think he should stay until 2026. But do I think it's going to get better in 2026? Honestly, no. I think it could end up getting worse, frankly. So I think he should stay, but do I think he should retire? Oh, it's so hard. Gun to my head, should he retire this year? Yes. Frankly. But I'm 50-50 on it. Quick fire question time. Let's go. Okay. These are going to be the quick fire questions for the last 10 minutes of this. Let's see what we got here. Tom, will Verstappen actually get banned? That is, in my head, a two-part question. Because the first part is, will he actually get a racing ban if he does get the 12 points? So if he gets an extra penalty point in the next, is it 2 or 3 races? Let me just check that. Because it's June 30th. It's 2 races, right? It's June 30th that he gets 2 points back. And then it's not until October. Wow, okay. Yeah, so after Austria, he loses 2 of the points. And then he has until October, the other 3. So let's answer this 2 points. So really quick. So if he does get the extra point, essentially, just to answer it in terms of pragmatic, like, will he be banned if he gets a point? Yes, because they won't have any excuses. Because the precedent was set with K-Mag, that they will actually ban someone under these points. Because for a long time, it did seem like they were unwilling to give the ban and they would work around it. Now, that being said, given that Verstappen is the only one realistically outside of the 2 McLarens in the title fight, will they be much, much, much more careful about giving him that point of a ban over the next 2 races? Yes, I do think so. So to answer the question bluntly, will he get a ban? I don't think so. I think they'll be so careful. And I also think, likewise, on the flip side of that, I think Verstappen and Red Bull will be so much more careful about how they handle things over the next 2 races. The thing that throws that away, though, is he has until October, realistically, where after June, it's only 3 points from then until the end of October. So, will he get a ban in the next month, in the next 22 days? I think it's unlikely. Will he get a ban between now and October? I think that's far more likely, because I think that he'll be out of this title fight by the end of July if things keep going the way they're going. And I think that's where we'll see angry Verstappen come in and kind of go, I'm sick of this, and do something to win a race or whatever. Yeah, I hope that answers the question, Tom. Probably doesn't really, though, does it? Jamie, silly season predictions. By the end of July, Toto is going to need to give an answer to George. Also, at the end of, I think it's this month, or is it after Silverstone, is when we'll start seeing things, because at the end of this month, I believe it is, or it's after Silverstone, I can't remember which, but basically in the next month, there is a performance clause that triggers in Max's contract, that if he's not second in the championship, which it looks like he won't be, he could leave. And I think that's when we'll get a final answer on him. But I think, frankly, I think Max will stay. I think George will stay. If I had to call it at the moment, I think that's the boring case, but I think that will happen. So I think those 2 will stay. I think the McLaren boys will stick around for 2026. I think, as I've just said, Hamilton and Leclerc stay. I think it's going to be a relatively dull, silly season in the top end. Again, if Max switches, that's all going to switch up real quick. But I think as it stands, I think the top teams stick with their current lineups. If I had to predict things, I think Lance stays for 2026, but I think he's on his way out soon. For a variety of reasons, mainly just being that I think that even if they have a dominant car in 2026, I think Alonso destroys him. I think anyone, frankly, who comes in there destroys him. At Alpine, I am leaning more and more towards the idea that Perez, if the Franco Colapinto situation doesn't work, will be in at Alpine. If not, I think it'll be Alpine keep their current lineup of Colapinto if Colapinto turns things around, because Colapinto's a more exciting option, in which case it could be either Bottas and Zhou in Cadillac, but more likely it'll be Perez and Zhou. Williams, I think, keeps the same lineup. Haas, I think, keeps the same lineup unless Hamilton retires, in which case Behrman will likely go to Ferrari. As for other changes, Sauber, I think, keeps this lineup for next season. I think there's no reason for them not to. Hulkenberg's delivering. Bortoletto's delivering. Yeah, this is going to be... I think this could be quite a dull, silly season. Unless Max moves. But otherwise, I think the only places we'll see changes for next year will be... Oh, no, actually, top team, sorry. I think Tsunoda stays for 2026 because I think that at the end of the day, you know, they're going to want to keep someone that they know of. I think Lawson goes, Lindblad comes in alongside Hadjar. And then I think it's Alpine and Cadillac are the only big moves, as I said, with those lineups. Could change, though, very quickly next month. Very quickly next month. Let's see. Trev says, should Flavio be booted? Absolutely not. How dare you? Flavio is our overlord and he should absolutely stay. No, I don't think so. I mean, okay. let me if Formula One was a moral and ethically first or championship, then of course he should go. But it's not. It's a performance championship. Bernie Eccleston made it that way. God rest his soul. I know he's not dead yet, but God rest him. Yeah, no, like in terms of just if you want someone who is going to wheeler deal and give you performance in the shortest time frame for next year and just literally throw anything out that's not performing as quickly as possible. If you want someone who's going to bring Red Bull mentality to Alpine and potentially bring Horner to Alpine, then no, keep Flavio. And I think the Mercedes engine deal is going to get them there for next year. I think someone's going to come in. If I had to call it, Flavio is going to do everything he can to get Horner over there. And he's going to give Horner a 24% share in the company somehow. You know, Horner will come in. The Alpine name will stay for 2026 before that gets bought out by someone else. But no, I think Flavio should stay for next year. Also because, as Elon Musk says, the most entertaining option is also the most likely. So yeah, I think Flavio should stay. Bob, are Sauber no longer washed? Jonathan Wheatley joins and Sauber has its first non-shit show of a strategy weekend. And finally, the pit stops are sorted at the same time that Red Bull's pit stops fall apart. I genuinely, one thing I will say on that, I know a lot of people will basically go, well, you know, that's the most obvious answer, so that's obviously it. You know, and I know there is a law about that generally the most likely outcome is, you know, the one that will take place, whatever that is. This light is killing my brain because of the heat and so on. But yeah, I don't think those two things are inextricably linked because of the short turnaround. But maybe there was some low-hanging fruit that Jonathan Wheatley picked up. On the flip side, I don't think that, you know, the entire Red Bull pit stop strategy just fell apart as soon as Jonathan Wheatley left. I think that coincidences just happen in Formula One so often. I mean, the Oliver Oaks thing is a perfect example of that. Are Sauber no longer washed though? No, I think they are still washed to an extent. But I think that what's happened is that Mattia Binotto is a very, very good team principal and good CEO for the team because he knows how to build things up. Do I think he's a CEO who can bring you title worthy cars and so on, a title worthy team? No. But I think that he knows what board control does to a team. And I think he has warned Audi of that. And I think he's the type of guy that could get you right to the line of a championship, and then you need someone else to get you there or to get you to that title. I think Jonathan Wheatley, as the team principal, is the guy who could do that because he's learned from Horner. So are they washed, to answer the question? Like, are they no longer washed? I think the fact is that between the new team that they've built and the fact that Audi is kind of now letting them do their thing, I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be built there. And I think they've found some of the key issues that they need to work on. Are they going to jump to the front next year? No. But are they going to be the joke that they were last year? No. So it depends on what your level of washed is, I guess, is the only way I could put that. Which doesn't really answer the question, unfortunately, does it? Sorry, Bob. Are they washed? No. Are they nearly washed? Yes. Can we leave it at that? No? Okay. Sorry, Bob. Final question on this, which I've kind of already answered, but this is from Kim. So if Horner leaves Red Bull, where does he go? I know I've already answered this in kind of somewhat in the long part, but let's just do it in a quick round. Ferrari, he doesn't go to, as far as I'm concerned, because I don't think Ferrari's willing to give him what he'll want, which is part ownership, first of all, because they weren't willing to give Newey any sort of stake. They're not willing to give him complete and final decision making on everything because they weren't willing to give Newey that on technical leadership. So they're definitely not going to give it to Horner on everything, especially drivers, because Elkin won't let that go. So I don't think it's Ferrari. Mercedes, obviously not, because Toto owns 33% of it and Toto's not going anywhere. McLaren, why would they? I mean, why would you upset that ship right now? And a lot of those guys, like especially Rob Marshall, for example, ex-Red Bull, Aston Martin, he won't go to because of Newey. I think Newey left, wanted the leadership. I don't think Newey's going to want to basically be back under the same leadership as before. So I think he'll veto that. Plus, they've got Andy Cowell, they've got Mike Crack and so on. Look, they need, I think, a strong team principal figure. But I don't think that's going to be Horner for a variety of reasons. Who else is there? I'm just going through the ones that I don't think. I don't think Audi because, no, I do kind of think Audi is on the table because I think that as much as Jonathan Wheatley is there right now, and that I think is a good decision, I think Horner's an upgrade, but I also think that Horner probably isn't going to be given a stake in the stake team. So I don't think he'll go there. And I think it's another board controlled company that he's not going to want to go to an extent. Cadillac, I think could work because they could give him part ownership in the company. And it's a long-term project and they need someone like Horner, frankly. So I think that is kind of on the table. I just think it's too big of a project for Horner to want to delve into, but I could be wrong there. So I'll put that as a maybe. Who else have we got on the grid? Haas? No, frankly, just Horner's not going to go there. Gene's not going to want to give him ownership. I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. And the setup just doesn't really work for Horner anyway, in terms of what they're trying to do. Is there anyone else? Williams? No, because Vels is doing a really good job, so you're not going to want to upset that. I'm missing a team here, haven't I? Oh, Racing Bulls, obviously not. Is there anyone else then? Who am I missing? I don't think anyone. Maybe I have missed someone. I don't think so, though. For me, it's Alpine. I think Alpine's the obvious choice because Flavio would be happy to work with him. He'd be able to work with Flavio, and I think it would be a case of Flavio would become kind of the guy who brings the deals in and stuff and works with the drivers to help him out there. So I think that it would be like getting Helmut and Horner, but in a situation where Horner could work with him and a less washed Helmut Marko. Because you ask me which company or which person will pick the best drivers, Helmut or Flavio, Team Flav all the way. Another video over. You could either watch a Storytime episode or subscribe to my Blatantly Biased Racing podcast or check out one of the great links in the description below, which is for you, the F1 and automotive fan. Well, do something at least.